So today we will be able to finish off the very last few slides of debt capital market and debt capital market instruments. We were discussing about bond sensitivity last week. Okay, that was our focus topic last week. What is bond price sensitivity? There we were looking at how a bond reacts to external changes in an interest rate. When the market interest rate fluctuates, what kind of a reaction can you expect in a bond price? Yes, the underlying relationship is negative. Whenever market interest rate increases, bond price will definitely decline. If the interest rate declines, bond prices will increase. That negative relationship is there. But what is our focus here? The reaction. It's a negative reaction, yes, but what is the degree of that reaction? Is it significant or is it less? Okay, the level in which it could fall or it could rise is what we are trying to address here. So there we first saw what were the factors which decided this degree of reaction. If external market interest rates changed, and as a result of that, bond price is getting impacted negatively, whether the fall will be drastic or minimum or at a minimal level would be decided by two factors. What were they? The coupon rate and the maturity. These two were deciding the extent of that reaction. Coupon rate, if it's higher, if a bond's inherent coupon rate is higher, we studied last week, it will definitely have a higher present value. Why? You get a higher interest income from that bond. So an investor who has a higher coupon rate bond, that particular bond will be valuable to him, and even though market interest rate reacts, his reaction, his extent or degree of reaction will not be so significant. So higher the coupon rate, low sensitive the bond price will be. Okay, we rationally saw why such a relationship came in. You will get a higher cash inflow if it's a higher coupon rate. Hence, your present value of the bond will increase. What about maturity? Longer the maturity, you are more susceptible to market changes, further interest rate fluctuations. And another reason is longer the maturity, the most significant cash inflow, which is repayment of your principal amount or repayment of the face value, gets delayed further. Due to these reasons, if a bond has a very long term to maturity and the market interest rates are reacting, an investor who holds on to such a bond will react significantly, or his degree of reaction will be very significant. Why? If your maturity is shorter, that means you're going to get your significant cash flow very quick. In such a situation, you are not vulnerable to any further to future interest rate changes, and for sure your principal repayment is going to come back soon, so you have an opportunity to reinvest as well. Okay, so due to these reasons, longer the maturity, more sensitive the bond price will be. So here we study the two factors which influence the bond price sensitivity. Now we know a relationship. Yes, there is a negative relationship between bond price and market interest rate. If market interest rate changes, bond price will decline, will show an inverse relationship. But that extent of inverse relationship depends on the coupon and maturity. So if the coupon is high, what a reaction you could expect, and if maturity is high, what kind of a reaction you could expect. Okay, so here we see just a relationship, just to understand the impact. We are yet unable to quantify that impact. We know if a bond has a low coupon and a longer maturity, then that bond is a highly sensitive bond to external interest rate changes. But we can't give a number to that reaction. We can't say, look here, this is the degree of reaction. To address that issue, the first step was a concept called duration. Duration helps to understand the precise degree of this bond price sensitivity. So what's the first initial step in duration? Frederick Macaulay introduced the Macaulay duration. What was his view? He said, okay, look here, we have coupon and maturity as the factors influencing bond price sensitivity. So, including or considering both these factors, we could calculate the weighted average term to maturity. Weighted average term to maturity of a bond. This effectively tells you the effective maturity of a bond. Yes, a bond will have a particular maturity period, but understand on a present value term, we still get certain cash flow before that maturity date. Am I wrong? Now let's say there is a bond, maturity period is 5 years. Do you get all your cash flows on the 5th year itself? No. You get coupon on the first year, second year. You have some kind of a cash inflow prior to that maturity date. Hence, Macaulay duration finds the effective maturity on present value terms. What is the effective maturity of this bond? So this considers the cash flow, and then based on that present value of the cash flow, you are weighting it against the time. Hence, you get the weighted average term to maturity. Now remember, in Macaulay duration, the answer or the final answer that you get has to be denoted in years. Why is that? Sorry. Why is that? Because you are weighting or you are placing a weightage on time. I hope you can see this clearly. Okay. I hope you can see this clearly. So here, why are we denoting the final answer in years? Because you're giving a weightage to this particular time. Hence, your answer will be in terms of years. Now, this weightage, how is this weightage arrived at? The present value of the cash flow, of one particular cash flow, divided by the present value of the bond itself, or the bond valuation that we do. Okay, the total of all present cash flows. So if you take it as a fraction out of the full bond price as per bond valuation, as per the intrinsic value of the bond, 38 rupees out of this comes in the first 6 months. Hence, 3.88% of this arrives at the end of 6 months. So, 6 months will get a weightage of 3.88%. At the end of 1 year, The present value portion that you get is 943 rupees out of 981. Hence, you get 96% of the intrinsic value of the bond at the end of first year. When you multiply this, you will get the Macaulay duration, which is 0.98 years. Now, in this question, you will be wondering, okay, maturity is 1 year, Macaulay duration is 0.98. It doesn't make any sense. But further the maturity, if you take 5 years, 4 years, Macaulay duration can vary when you calculate. Okay, it will be definitely less than the maturity period given if there is a coupon involved. If whenever it's a coupon giving bond, definitely the Macaulay duration will be shorter than the maturity of that bond. Why? Because part of the cash flow comes upfront. If it's a zero coupon bond, which means no coupon payment, then until the end of that bond or until maturity, no any cash flow. So there won't be a 6 months over here. 100% of the bond value will come at the end of maturity. So it will be 100% to the maturity year. Hence, if it's a zero coupon bond only, the Macaulay duration will be equal to the maturity of the bond. I told you to note it down as well last week. If it's a zero coupon bond, Macaulay duration will always be equal to the maturity of the bond. Why? What's the reason? Because there is no cash inflow prior to the maturity. But whenever there is a cash inflow prior to the maturity, in other words, if it's a coupon giving bond, it can be a higher coupon, lower coupon, whatever it is. As long as there is a coupon being paid for the bond, Macaulay duration will be lesser than maturity. Can it be more than maturity? Of course, no. In case you get an answer where Macaulay duration the value is higher than your maturity, that means you have done an error. It can never be fundamentally higher than your maturity period. All right. So where did we stop last week? We were going through impact on the changes. We understood how it's being calculated. Now what we were trying to do is, through a calculation, we were trying to test the relationship. What was the relationship? We know if bond maturity increases, bond price sensitivity will increase. If coupon rate increases, bond price sensitivity will decline. So we are trying to match this and see whether it actually works on duration, whether we can see that when you calculate duration. So there, the very first question was, there's a 4-year bond with 10% coupon. The coupon is being paid semi-annually, every 6 months, and 8% is the yield of that bond. You have to calculate duration. Now I told you, when you are calculating duration for bond valuation, oh, all right, but because this is duration, answer has to be in years. So when you denote the timing, go with years. Don't write it as months. Go in years. If it's 6 months, you write 0.5 years. 12 months, 1 year. 18 months, go for 1.5 years. Okay, always denote your T in terms of years. Then you match your cash flow, 10% for a year, but remember here it's being paid out semi-annually, so 50 rupees. And then you find your discount factor. Even though your yield is 8, can you use 8 itself here? No. The coupon period is not yearly. It is semi-annually. Hence, 8% divided by 2, you will use 4%. Can you see here? You will use 4%. Find your discount factor. When you multiply 50 into the discount factor, you will get the present value of all the cash flows. When you add all of them, you will get 1067.37. What is this? What is this 1000 rupees and 1067 rupees and 34 cents? It is the intrinsic value of this particular bond. In other words, that is the true value or true price of this bond. Can we stop there itself? No. It's Macaulay duration. You need to find the weightage. I told you there are two approaches. How the two approaches differ depends on when you do the step. Okay. Now, after you find the price, you can simply divide 48 divided by 1067, get the weightage for each present value and multiply it by T and get your answer. Or what can you do? You simply multiply this present value with the time first. Why? There is no point of you finding the weightage first. By the denominator is the same. To make your life easier, the easiest approach is multiply the present value into the time, which is in the last column, and add all of those. You will get 3645. You divide this final figure by the bond's price, which is the common denominator when you calculate the weightages. So when you divide that by the bond's price, you will get a duration of 3.42 years. Now, can you see maturity of the bond is 4 years, but Macaulay duration of the bond is 3.42 years. Now, next question, 4-year bond, but coupon has declined. 6% coupon, 8% yield. Now, just by looking at the question, what can you say? You can definitely say that the face value of the bond will be less than, the intrinsic value of the bond or the true price of the bond will be less than the face value. Why? Coupon is less than the yield. That is one. Just by reading the question, you can understand that. Second is comparison to the first scenario, coupon has reduced. So if coupon reduced or declined, what can you say about bond price sensitivity? This particular bondholder will be more sensitive to external price changes or external interest rate changes. Why? You are having a 6% coupon only. Moment the interest rate increases from, let's say, 5% to 6, the 10% coupon holder is still safe. Why? He still has 4% margin left. But for you, there is a no profit, no loss situation. Okay. So the low coupon bond holder will be more sensitive to interest rate changes. Hence, the duration that you're going to calculate has to be higher than 3.42. You don't know the value, but you know it will be definitely higher than 3.42, but lesser than 4 years. Okay. So with that knowledge, let's go. Okay. You have the timing, no change in that. But here cash flow has changed. Earlier you got 10%. Now you are only getting 6%. So 6 divided by 6% is for a year. For a year you get coupon twice. So for one coupon payment you will get 30 rupees. Okay. So you will adjust your coupon Your discount factors will remain the same while there is no change in the yield or the period. So when you discount and get the present value of each cash flow and add all these cash flow, can you see that the true price of the intrinsic value of the bond is lesser than its face value of 1000? So our first understanding was correct. Okay. Now move on, we are going to find the Macaulay duration. What can you do? Simply multiply the present value of each cash flow with its timing. So half divide into 28.84, 1 into 27, 1.5 into 26. Okay. Then the final column will get filled. Addition of all these weightages will give you 3356. When you divide this by the common denominator, which should be the bond's price, 932.68, you will get your Macaulay duration as 3.6 years. Now, can you see this answer is higher than this particular duration, which means this bond, this 6% coupon bond is more interest sensitive than the 10% coupon. So our understanding is still stands. Then we moved on to D, where we are now changing the tenor. For now, let's skip C, move on to D. Why? We looked at coupon and maturity first. So 3-year bond, no change in the coupon, no change in the yield. Just the tenor has declined. It has not extended, it has come a bit nearer. 10% coupon, 8% yield. What can you tell about the true price or the price of this bond? Definitely higher than face value of 1000. That is one. Next, what can you comment about the interest price sensitivity? The very initial, now this is the very initial scenario. Okay. In this initial scenario, it took 4 years for your cash flows to come. Now, it's only taking 3 years, 1 year less. Which means, will you be more keen to hold on to a 3-year bond or a 4-year bond? Obviously, shorter the tenor, you're more keen to hold on to it. Why? You will quickly get your cash flows, you have opportunity to reinvest, okay? And you're not susceptible to more vulnerabilities or volatilities in the market. So ideally, the duration that you calculate for situation D will be lesser than 3.42. Why? 3.42 is the duration for 4-year bond. Now here maturity has declined. When maturity declines, sensitivity also declines. Positive relationship, remember? Positively related. So here maturity declines. We should see bond price sensitivity declining as well. Let's see whether we could see that. So here again, timing denoted as years. Timing denoted as years, but it will stop at 3. There is no change in the cash flow. Coupon rate is the same, but your face value now comes at the end of 3rd year. In the previous question, it came at the end of 4th year. Your discount rates, yield is same, so remaining as it is. Then you multiply and find the present value of each cash flow. Add all this and you will get the intrinsic value of this bond as 1052.42. So our first understanding is right, higher than the face value. The true value of the bond is higher than the face value. Okay, so it's a premium bond. Now each present value of the cash flow is going to be multiplied by the timing. That is what you find here. Addition of all that, you will get 2814.63. This divided by the common denominator, which would be the price of this bond, is 1052.42. Then your duration is 2.67 years. Now this is lesser than 3.42. Can you see? So that is also justified. Lesser the maturity, lesser the sensitivity of the bond. Remember, if the duration is lesser, duration value is lesser, it denotes low sensitivity. If duration value is higher, it denotes higher sensitivity. Okay. Now we are going into two further learnings. Now this is something additional for you all in case there will be some adjustment done in your question, just for you to have a thorough understanding to this rationale. Now remember, in bond price sensitivity, how does it operate? If the bondholder feels that this bond is valuable to them, then bondholder will not react as much. So valuable bonds which give them higher present value cash flows, higher yields, higher return, are more valuable to an investor. Isn't it? If you have invested in a bond and that is giving you high cash inflow, high returns, quick money, more earlier cash flows, that bond is valuable to you. Even though there are market rate changes, your reaction will be minimal. Why? You're still interested in this bond. That is the underlying thinking behind all this. Now, we are going to test and see whether that holds true. Let's go to situation E. Now we have a 3-year bond with 10% coupon, but without coupon coming in every 6 months. Now the coupon is being paid annually. There is a slight change. Without getting it in the 6 months, now you are getting it at the end of 1 year. What do you think the duration would be? Now here we know 3-year bond with 10% coupon semi-annually. Situation D gave us a duration of 2.67. This is when you get the coupon every 6 months. Now they are saying, sorry, we can't pay you every 6 months. We will pay you every year. Your cash inflow, which should have come in the 6th month, is now getting pushed by another 6 months. Now to 1 year, which means there is a delay in your cash inflow. Longer the period for an inflow. So your duration should be higher than 2.67. In situation D, you got 2.67 as the duration. To that same situation, what we are doing is we are just adjusting the frequency. We didn't adjust anything else, just the frequency. What kind of an impact will that have on sensitivity? Because there is a delay in your frequency in payment, there might not be a significant change in the duration, but still the sensitivity is higher. To a person who's holding on to bond D is getting their payments every 6 months. But if I'm having bond E, I have all characteristics being same, But for my interest, I have to wait for 1 year, which means present value of that one cash flow is going to decline. Can we see the answer for E? Can you see here? Duration is slightly higher than bond D. Why is that happening? You are getting a higher cash inflow, 100 rupees. But the timing here, at the end of 1 year, the present value of the total cash flow is 92. But here at the end of 1 year, when you add these two, you end up close to 94. Relatively higher in value because you're getting some money at the end of 6 months itself. Okay, but here another reason why I've included this question here is, now this is for you to practice duration when there is annual coupon payment. Can you see, have I used half years here? No, your coupon payment comes every year. So T is just 1, 2, 3 by only 3 coupon payments. You can fully take your coupon ratio, coupon percentage, which is 10%. And can you see the yield here? I'm directly using 8%. No need to divide it by 2 to find the yield for the coupon period. This will give me a duration of 2.7 years, which shows that this bond is more sensitive to interest rate changes. Now we are going to change something else. What if the yield of that bond changes? The initial scenario still holds. Initial scenario still holds. But 10% coupon, yes, semi-annually, but now 10% yield. The yield has increased. What does yield tell you? Yield essentially means your return. Your return has increased. When your return has increased, will this bond will be valuable to you or not? There are two bonds. One bond is only giving you 8% yield. Another bond is giving you 10% yield. If you hold it on to 1 year, it gives you 10% return each year. Another bond only gives you 8% yield for each year. What bond is more valuable to you? C. So more valuable the bond is, we know less sensitive the bond holder will be. Let's see whether we could see that. You have the same tenor, same cash flows, but here your present value has changed. Why? Your yield is now 10% for a year, hence for 6 months it will be 5. When you take the present value of each cash flow and add all of these and find the bond price. Now, you don't have to add even all this. You definitely have to find the present value of each cash flow for you to find this weightage. But you don't have to do a step of adding all these up. Why? Even without adding all this, you should know face value will be equal to the intrinsic value of the bond. Why? Coupon is same as the yield. Coupon rate is 10%. Your yield is also 10%. Which means this is a par bond. You cannot demand for a premium or for a discount. It will be a par bond. So you can even omit this addition work. So all these, when you add all these together, you will definitely get 1000. Then you continue with multiplying each of these present value of cash flow with their relevant timing. Fill up the last column, addition of all these last weighted present value of cash flows, you will get 3,393. That divided by the price of the bond or intrinsic value of the bond, you will get a duration of 3.39. Now this is lesser than this. Can you see? Why is that? Because the yield of this particular bond is higher. This bond is giving you a better return than this. Now you will be wondering, how come? Now in bond A, 8% yield, but you're getting a 10% coupon. How can you say that this is a low yield bond? I told you, even though it's a 10% coupon, yes, the investor expects 8% as their yield. Sorry, investor expects 10% as their yield, but the bond is giving you 10% coupon. They are very excited. They are willing to even pay more than the face value. Hence, it's a premium bond. But remember, when you pay more than your face value, you end up losing on that premium. Get it? So even though you get 10% coupon, you have a loss coming in because you paid a premium to purchase that. When those two gets nullified, your average yield from that bond will only be 8. Okay? Hence why here it stays at, yield will stay at 8. Another way for you to look at is, to get a 10% coupon, this particular bond holder has to buy this bond at 1000 rupee and 67. But to buy bond C again, which is giving 10% coupon, this particular bond holder only has to pay 1000. Hence, C is a high yield bond. Whenever you have a high yield bond, which means the bond gives you more return, that is valuable to a bond holder. Hence, sensitivity of that bond will be lesser. Do you get the underlying rationale of all how to measure the bond price sensitivity? If the bond is a valuable bond, a high cash flow bond, a high present value holding bond, and more quicker in terms of cash flow, that will definitely have a low interest rate sensitivity. So here we have the learning of that. Higher duration, which means more price sensitive. That feature, more price sensitive bonds are definitely bonds with longer maturity, lower coupon, lower yield rates, lower coupon frequency. What do you mean by lower coupon frequency? Without you being getting it for two frequency, for a year without getting it twice, you're only getting it once. Okay, your coupon frequency is reducing. Okay. Now again, there is an issue with Macaulay duration as well. Now you'll be wondering, what is this? There's so many issues. Why are we learning all this? These are for you to understand how the thinking evolved. You can't just jump into and study the very last formula. There are understandings, even though there are shortcomings, there is so much to learn from Macaulay duration. This was the first concept that was able to quantify the interest rate sensitivity or bond price sensitivity. Okay. Even though it quantified it, there was an issue with Macaulay duration. Why? The answer was in years. I can still only tell you whether this bond is a high sensitive bond or a low sensitive bond by looking at Macaulay duration. I can't say the extent of its reaction. I can't say if the interest rate goes up by 1%, price of this bond will decline by 10%. I can't give that 10% value without calculating. I don't know how to calculate through Macaulay yet. Why? Macaulay duration still gave me an answer in years. It didn't help me to quantify that bond price change. Get it? This only gives you the weighted average maturity period, the effective maturity period. By looking at this particular answer, can I say if interest rate increased by 1%, price of this bond A will decline by 3.42%? No, I can't say that. Why? This is in years. This is just an indication whether the sensitiveness is higher or low. It didn't quantify the impact. Hence, to quantify the impact, what did they have to do? They had to modify Macaulay duration. Now they modified this to modified duration. It is an extension of Macaulay duration where they had to adjust it, change it so that it quantified the impact. It gave the answer that the portfolio managers wanted. If I am a portfolio manager, I have a bond portfolio which I have to manage. The question I have is, if the market interest rate moves up right now by 1%, how will my portfolio react? I know definitely my bond prices will decline, but one bond can decline at a very higher rate. One bond can react at a very low rate. So I have to adjust my exposure according to that. Now imagine I have 100 million. Out of that 100 million, I went and invested 70% on a high sensitive bond and only 30% on a low sensitive bond. And for my bad timing, market interest rates are increasing. That high sensitive bond is now going to decline very significantly, which means 70% of my portfolio will show a decline. Only 30%, yes, there will be a decline, but marginal. Understand? So quantifying the impact will help me to understand the impact on my portfolio. So that answer was given by modified duration. What does modified duration do? It measures the degree of the bond price movement in response to a change in interest rate. So ideally, if interest rate changes by 1%, what is the change on the bond price? So how is the formula derived at? You have to calculate Macaulay duration, divide that by 1 plus yield to maturity divided by number of payments per year. For a year, how many payments does that, the frequency of your payments, you divide just by for 1 year, not for the entire maturity, just for 1 year. That will give you the modified duration. Now remember, modified duration or any duration for that matter is always negative. Why is it negative? Because there is an inverse relationship between bond price and the interest rates. Okay, because there is a negative relationship, you have to know duration, even though they give it you as a number, is always a negative number. Okay, now this is how you would ideally change Macaulay duration to modified duration. Okay, Now here again, there was an issue. What is this issue? And now I get the modified duration. Using the modified duration, I can now find the change in a bond price, the percentage change in bond price, by multiplying the modified duration into percentage change in yield. Okay, by multiplying the modified duration, which is negative. That's why I've always put a negative sign here, which is negative due to the inverse relationship between bond price and interest rate. I put my modified duration figure here, multiply that by the percentage change in the yield or percentage change in the market interest rate. I will get the percentage change in the bond price. Okay, if I need to know the change in the bond price in terms of rupees or amount, same formula, but I have to multiply that by the initial bond price as well. Then I will get just the change in the bond price in amount terms. So using this modified duration, I can go to my intended goal, which is I can now measure the bond price movement to a change in the interest rate. But small issue in this formula is, without calculating Macaulay duration, you cannot go and find modified duration. Correct? So if you want to find modified duration, you have to get the cash flow, present value, weight the cash flow, then add the weighted cash flow, divide that by the bond price, find the Macaulay duration, get the Macaulay duration, put this formula, and then get the modified duration. A very lengthy step. So a method to find modified duration without you spending time on getting on Macaulay duration is readjust this formula. They use this formula to arrive at this relationship, and finally this equation was modified, where you can now find modified duration by simply dividing percentage change in price, bonds price, by the percentage change in the yield. Remember, because these two are negatively related, there is a negative sign here. Okay, it is from this big formula here they found this particular relationship, and from this relationship this particular formula was derived. Now let's see whether we can do a calculation out of this. Now here I have used the lengthier, I have given you the Macaulay duration, but just for you to test on, get an understanding on this particular formula. Okay, so you have a bond, and that bond has a Macaulay duration of 7 years and has a yield of 5 with an annual coupon payment. Okay, if the market rate goes up, so that the yield goes up to 5.5%. Calculate the percentage change in the bond price. Now you have to calculate the percentage change in the bond price. Percentage change in the bond price is equal to minus, why is that minus? To denote the negative relationship. Modified duration into change in the yield. Earlier yield was 5, now yield is 5.5. So change is 0.5. Okay, in terms of percentages. Modified duration, how are you going to find? You have your Macaulay duration, which is 7, divided by 1 plus directly your yield to maturity, your initial yield to maturity, not the changed one, your initial yield to maturity. Okay, why? This modified duration is you're finding for that bond on initial terms, not just on the change. Okay, so 5% is the initial yield to maturity. You have to divide it by K, but here there is an annual coupon payment, hence K will be 1. So you can ignore that, just 1 plus 5%. Then you will get the percentage change in bond price as minus 3.33%. So your bond price will reduce by 3.33% by your yield going up by 0.5. Okay, that's the impact. You have now gauged the impact of that bond on your portfolio. Calculate the new price of the bond. If the earlier price is 990, so how do you find the change in the bond price? Same formula, but you have to multiply it by the initial bond price, which is 990. So minus 3.33 into 990, meaning your bond price is now going to decline by 33 rupees. Okay, 33 rupees. Hence, new price of this bond will be 957. Okay, so just by doing a modified duration, now you're able to quantify the impact of the market change and find the new bond price as well. So with that, we are done with duration. There is another additional concept that I want you to be aware of, just for your knowledge purpose, so far not yet tested in your past papers, but just for your knowledge. Okay. Okay. Concept of convexity. Now, throughout this entire duration chapter or duration lesson, I kept telling you bond price is negatively related to interest rate. If interest rate increases, bond price will decline. Okay. So many of you would have thought that it's a linear relationship. If there is a 1% increase, a 1% reduction. Okay. The change will be same throughout. Okay. Irrespective of when the interest rate is changing, the degree of the change being the same. For example, here we saw 0.5% change in yield reduce the price by 3.33. So you will assume that this degree is going to be static or same throughout each point. But when they studied duration, they understood it didn't work out like that. Yes, there is a change, but duration just denotes one value, correct? It just denotes one value. It's as if, now if you read this value, what will you say? You will say whenever yield changes by 0.5, this particular bond's price will change by 3.33. Now here it has changed from 5 to 5.5. So from 5.5, if it increases to 6, again you will say, okay, bond price will fall by 3.3. Correct? Now we are just giving one change, that change being constant throughout the timing. Okay, that's what duration is telling us. But when you actually quantify the impact or the relationship between bond price and interest rate, you don't see that linear relationship. Okay, linear relationship meaning, hold on. Yeah. Hope you can see this clearly. Okay. This is the, so this is what duration tells you. Duration says, look here, whenever interest rate, now this is the interest rate or yield, whenever interest rate changes by 0.5, price will change by 3.3. Whenever 0.5, 3.3. So you assume that this change is same. This is the rate of change at each point. Hence, you imagine that price and yield are negatively related, yes, but in a linear way. That this change remains the same throughout. But it was understood that this change is a non-linear relationship. In other words, it had a convex change. Yes, there is a negative relationship, but remember this particular duration value kept changing at each point. Yes, at one value it will be higher, at one place it was lower. Why? Due to this convex relationship. So if you try to use duration for a very large change in interest rate, okay, now here we used for 0.5% change in interest rate, we are using duration. That's all right. But if you try to find duration for a 5% change in yield or for a 10% change in interest rate, the answer that you get could be misleading. Why? Duration measures it on a non-linear base, on a linear basis. But the real relationship is non-linear. And you see this? It's non-linear. So if you want to find a smaller change, it can be approximately correct. But if you go to find a very large relationship, you might end up at a wrong value. Okay. Hence, if there is a larger change in the interest rate, it's advised to use convexity to find the extent of the bond prices change, not just duration, to consider the convexity factor as well in your calculation. Now here, can you see if there is a larger interest rate increase, okay, if there's a larger interest rate increase, duration will overestimate the fall in the bond price. It will say, look here, your bond price is going to fall by a very larger percentage, but in reality, it will be very low. If you go to look at a larger interest rate decline, duration might underpredict or underestimate your price increase. But in reality, it will be higher. Okay. Now let me explain that to a bit more detailed. Now, this is the relationship that you get with duration, correct? Okay. Now assume you are at this point. Okay, you are at this point from this particular, this is the interest rate right now. Let's say it's at 5. From 5, we are assuming that interest rates are going to increase to 10. So there is a 5% increase in the interest rate. Okay. Now, if you are trying to find through duration, what does duration will tell you? Look here, duration will tell you this is your new bond price. You were at this bond price now, but due to a 5% change, this is going to be your new bond price. But in reality, can you see that your bond price is just this. It's not so low, it's higher than that. This should be the correct figure. Now, because you're using duration to quantify a change or to quantify the impact of a larger change in interest rate, what happens? The duration tries to overestimate the decline. It will tell you, look here, your bond price is going to fall by 20%. But in reality, it will only fall by 15 or 16%. So there is a overestimation. If you use duration for a larger increase in interest rate, it will overestimate the price decline. What happens if you try to estimate bond price change to a larger decrease in interest rate? Now here from 5 to 10. Now let's say you are going to now move from 5 to you were at this particular point. From here, okay, why is this happening? From let's say 6%, your plan, there is a reduction of let's say to 3%. Just an assumption, okay? So as per duration, it will tell you, look here, this is your initial price. At 6%, this will be your initial price. Let's say it's at X. So at 3%, duration estimates, because there is a decline in interest rate, price will increase. Okay, that's the inverse relationship, correct? Interest rate declines, price is expected to increase. So when price increases, duration says, look here, this is your new price, which is at Y. But in reality, even though duration measures it to be this, in reality, your price increase will be much higher. At this particular point. Okay, at this particular point. Hence, if there is a interest decline, what happens? Will duration overestimate the price increase? No, it underestimates the price increase. It will tell you, no, the bond price won't increase so much. Increase will be very less. So what happens? Now out of this, what am I trying to tell you? If you use duration to changes in interest rate, where such change is a very larger change, then it will underestimate a price increase and overestimate a bond price decline. How is that going to impact you as a portfolio manager? If you overestimate the price decline, even to a good bond, you might try to sell off soon. Why? You incorrectly misjudged the price decline. Okay? If you underestimate the price increase, again, In a situation where interest rate is decline, you assume no, this bond's price won't increase so much. But in reality, it will. You might again lose a good capital gain. Okay. Hence, if you're trying to use duration to a larger change in interest rate, it is advised to factor in. Now here, can you find change in bond price? It's good for you to factor in the impact of convexity. How do you find the impact of convexity? They will give you the convexity factor. To use that convexity factor multiplied by the yield should be in decimal form when you do this. Yield should be squared and multiplied with convexity, then you will get your convexity impact. Use that in your bond price calculation. Now you don't have to have knowledge on how to measure this convexity unless you want to pursue further studies in finance. Finding convexity factor is mathematical derivation. You have to do mathematical derivation to find the convexity factor of a bond. Okay. For your knowledge, what is required is understand that duration is a measure of interest rate risk or bond price sensitivity. Okay. It will be negative due to the inverse relationship. Know the factors which are influencing them. Initially, it was Macaulay duration, later changed to modified duration. When can you use duration in your calculations? Whenever interest rate change is a minor change or a minimal change, yes, go ahead, use duration. But if there is a larger change in interest rate, duration will not be a good measure. Then, along with duration, you can't stand alone use duration. Along with duration, you have to factor in the impact of convexity. Okay, I hope you understood. The convexity side of it is for your knowledge purposes I have included, because so far not yet tested in your particular paper, but I think it's tested in your FM paper at the moment. But for you to understand and get a holistic knowledge on this entire area, if not, it will be a half-baked lesson only. Okay, so with that, we are done with debt capital market and debt capital market instruments. I hope you've got a good knowledge of this. So this week, when we do the weekly questions, I will definitely include more calculations of duration. So last week, I didn't put calculations of duration. I put MCQs on duration because you were not so, advanced or not so experienced on calculation yet. Because I saw few students still struggled for certain bond price calculations. So you need to get your foundation correct before you jump into something like duration. Okay, so I will start to include those calculations from tomorrow onwards. So attempt that and get back to me. Let's work on how we could improve on your calculation side. Before we move on to our next lesson, I just want to discuss certain questions with you, certain questions that I felt that you all had misjudged or not done very well when it comes to the weekly lessons. Certain common issues that I faced when I was correcting the papers. Okay. So these MCQs were included in last week lesson. Which of the following is the most common way of raising short-term funds by primary dealers? Now, understand there are 4 answers. You can tackle MCQs in 2 ways. If you know the answer, jump into it. Yes, mark the right answer. If not, use your elimination method. Now, here we know this question is talking about money market. How do we know that? short-term funds. We are talking about short-term fundraising. Hence, question relates to money market. Now, what money market instrument did we learn as a mostly used instrument by primary dealers? Who were primary dealers? Primary dealers were intermediaries involved when it comes to government securities, treasury bonds and treasury bills. A way for them to raise funds in the short term market. Is reserve requirement a part of it? No, that is involved with central bank. Banks to have the SRR. That's definitely a no. Repurchase agreement. We know what is the underlying collateral of repurchase agreement commonly used. Treasury bills and bonds. You use that to borrow funds temporarily. What's the agreement? You agree to repurchase the collateral in the future. So for a short time, you're borrowing funds. Bankers' acceptance, that comes to international trade. Are primary dealers involved with international trade? No. So that's definitely no. Commercial papers. Who issue commercial papers? We have non-financial backed companies or corporates issuing commercial papers. Primary dealers, now there you will have only two answers, repurchase and commercial. So we know commercial papers are most commonly used by non-financial corporates. Hence, repurchase agreement is the fund method used by primary dealers to raise short-term funds. This is all we learned that in detail when we went through the slide. There were some students, I think, who weren't able to find this particular answer properly. They had mistook reserve requirement and commercial paper in the answer. The correct answer would be repurchase agreement. Why? We know primary dealers are the authorized dealers when it comes to treasury bills and bonds, which are the collaterals used in repurchase agreement. So they have several treasury bills and bonds. They can use those bills and bonds, borrow further money, and again buy more treasury bills and bonds in upcoming auctions. Okay, so this is the most common way that primary dealers raise their short-term funds. Next, clean price. Now, when did we learn clean price? Clean price is a term that we learned when it came to bond terminologies. We learned that under accrued interest. So what does clean price tell you? Is it price without commission to the broker? Price when it's first issued? Price without accrued interest? Price inclusive of interest which has accumulated since the last coupon payment? Net of tax price of the bond. You should remember clean price refers to price without taking into consideration the accrued interest. In other words, clean price is the market ongoing price. If you sell your bond at the market ongoing price without factoring the accrued interest that you should have received from the time since the last coupon payment and until your selling date, then it's clean price. You have not tampered with the price. What is dirty price? If the question says the term dirty price is the, then your answer will be D. Why? In dirty price, you do have the market price. On top of that, you will include your accrued interest. What is your accrued interest? The interest that you should earn or the interest that is entitled for the seller from the last coupon payment date and until the selling date. Hence the term dirty price. So here the answer will be C, price without accrued interest. Accrued interest is the interest paid by the issuer of the bond, accrued interest since the last coupon date paid by the seller to the purchaser of the bond, accrued interest since the last coupon date paid by the purchaser to the seller of the bond, the interest on bond paid on maturity. What is the correct answer? So many students, they couldn't find the difference. I don't know whether they could find the difference between these two, but they misunderstood these two. The answer is C. Accrued interest is the interest that has been accrued since the last coupon date, but who will pay the accrued interest to who? We saw that accrued interest will be paid by the new purchaser to the seller of the bond. Why? Now the seller is selling this bond before the next coupon date, correct? So at the next coupon date, the new purchasing party or the new purchaser will get the entire coupon. Is it correct? The purchaser didn't have it for the entire coupon period. He would have had only for some time. Hence, the purchaser has to pay the accrued interest portion on that trade day itself to the seller of the bond. Okay, I think so they were confused with this end of the question. So be careful when you attempt MCQ, read it clearly. You always have a reading time when it comes to your exam. Make use of that when you do your MCQs. Okay. Then another area where so many of you all had errors is the bond valuation. Now, when I say so many of all, just a certain handful of students, but all the others had attempted it well. But just if you can again listen to it and revise again, it would be better. Here, when it comes to bond valuation, we have 4 steps. We discussed that in the slide as well. Okay. Now the most common error that the students do is they fail to understand that the coupon rate is an annual coupon rate. Okay. This 10%, don't read this part of it. This percentage is an annual rate. Okay. For an entire year, you will only get 10% of the face value of the bond. Okay, that is one. Next is the payment frequency. Payment frequency depends on your coupon payment frequency. Okay, in this question, you have to find the value of the bond. For that, you need to know the payment frequency. Why? Depending on the payment frequency, you have to know each cash flow. Maturity of the bond is 5 years. So in this 5 years, how many times are you getting your cash flow? Your coupon is paid annually in this question. Correct? In this particular question, coupon is paid annually. So for your 5 years, first year once, second year once, third year once, fourth year once, fifth year once, you will get 5 coupon payments. And at the end of 5th year, you will get your face value as well. So your payment frequency here is only 5. Why is it 5? Is it because maturity is 5? No. Even though maturity is 5, coupon is paid out annually. Hence, for every year, just once. Okay, I hope I'm being very clear to you. That's why here payment frequency is just 5. Alright, can you see the payment? Just 5 times in that particular until maturity you will get your coupons. Now come to this particular question. Here you have to find the bond price. Maturity is 4 years. Does that mean the payment frequency is 4 years? No. Let's see the coupon payment frequency. Coupon rate is 8.2%. And this is paid in semi-annual payments. Which means for a year you get 8.2%. Okay. Then for 6 months, do you get 8.2? No, you get half of 8.2 each 6 months. Am I clear? That's why even though coupon rate is 8.2, your coupon will be 82 for a year. So for 6 months, you will only get 41. Because it is 4 years, each year you will now get coupon twice. For first year twice, second year twice, third year twice, fourth year twice. So how many times are you getting your cash flow? 8 times. Your maturity is 4. Coupon payment frequency is twice a year. Hence, payment frequency will be 8 times. Can you see that here? 8 times you will get your coupon. At the 8th period, you will get your face value as well. Now, some students, they are very smart. What happens is, why can't we take 1 year 82 and do the cash flow directly? That is wrong, because here we are doing a present value calculations. I told you, you getting 82 rupees at the end of 12 months and getting 41 rupees in the 6 months and 41 rupees after another 6 months is different. Even though in nominal terms it's the same, if you discount it or take the time value into consideration, it is different. Okay, so be very mindful. You have to identify the payment frequency. Only then you have to find your payment frequency and you have to find the relevant cash flow. Then only you can do rest of the calculation properly. If not, even though you know your methods, you know your formulas, if you make an error in these two, you can't proceed. Okay. This is another question I included last week. Again, here, a 6-year bond that pays rupees 30 as interest twice each year. Now here, I haven't given you the coupon rate. I have given you the coupon amount for 6 months, which is 30. It is 30 as interest twice each year. Okay, you will get 30 rupees twice each year. Hence, for 1 year, you will get 60 rupees. All right. Now, using that, you have to find the value of the bond. It's a 6-year bond. Tenor is 6. Does that mean payment frequency is also 6? No. You have to see the coupon payment frequency. For a year, how many times are you paid coupon? Twice each year, which means In the first year twice, second year twice, third year twice, fourth year twice, fifth year twice, sixth year twice. Then 12 times you will get your coupon. Hence, your payment frequency has to be 12. Coupon payment has to match according to that. And at the 12th payment, now this 12th payment happens in the 6th year. At the end of 6th year, you will get your principal payment. Okay. Similarly, very last question we have. Here, 10-year maturity. Okay, 10-year maturity. Coupon is 6.5. In a percentage term, whenever coupon rate is denoted, it's an annual rate. Okay, so here 65 rupees for a year, meaning paid out semi-annually. 65 rupees is for a year. So every 6 months you end at 32 rupees and 50 cents. So for 10 years, twice a year you get your coupon. We are talking about a coupon frequency of 20 years. Okay, so for 20 years, you have to do your calculation and arrive at the bond price. First, I want you to master this particular calculations very well. You will be wondering, okay, in case there is a 20 payment frequency question, how can you handle it in an exam? There is a shorter formula, but for me to introduce the shorter formula, it depends on your expertise. So for certain students who are able to show very good marks in terms of bond valuation, I have shared you that particular formula. So you can reattempt the same question with the shorter formula, cross-check your answers and see whether it's correct or not. Okay. So for the others, first reattempt this, do it again and get back to me. We will go through and see where you're making the error. First, get the basic correct and then we'll move on to the shortcut. Okay. So again, this week, the weekly question will have questions relating to the debt capital market. For maybe let's say for the next 2 weeks, let's handle that topic because that topic is a very significant topic for all of you. And with that, we will move on to the equity questions after that. Okay. So going through this week update, I hope you are all reading news. Please, even though whether you are doing your exam this session or not, be vigilant about what's happening in the market. So this is a new addition done to the Colombo Stock Exchange. I will definitely cover this when when we are closer to the exam in detail. I usually share a slide on the updated market happenings closer to your exam because definitely in your exam there will be one question which talks about the current financial market affairs. Okay, what foreign central banks are up to, what our local central bank is up to, what happened in certain markets. Okay, those are expectations that even the examiner has, that for they all are aware about what's happening in the market. Okay, so closer to the exam I do a small slide where I'll tell you probable happenings which happened in the past 6 months, past 1 year, which I feel is probable for your exam. So this is one such incident where CSE is now introducing repo. Okay, repurchase agreement. Remember we learned repurchase agreement going for treasury bills and bonds. Now to our local market, they are bringing in repurchase agreement to corporate debt securities. Now why is this important? Because there are two important factors here. We know Colombo Stock Exchange is a centralized platform. Okay, here there is a specific over-the-counter platform being introduced just for repo transactions. So that is one thing you need to know. There is a new over-the-counter platform introduced by the CSC for repo transactions. Next, here repo transactions are going to be done for corporate debt securities which are listed in the stock exchange. Okay, the corporate debt security has to be listed in the stock exchange for you to engage in this repo platform. We are yet to see more rules and regulations or framework on this. So once it's out, I will do a detailed explanation to you on how it's working in the market at the moment. I think currently they have just called in applications for participants to register for this OTC platform. Okay. So just for your awareness, read through what's happening in the markets. Okay. So with that, we will start our new market for today, which is equity market and instrument. Okay. Now this is a new world. So far, we've been dealing with debt capital markets in terms of money and even capital market. Now we are venturing into capital market, yes, but it's a different instrument or a different avenue. Equity. What is equity? Equity, or a share in other terms, is representing ownership, interest to a underlying project or underlying company. You take responsibility for that underlying company or the project. When we talk about debt, we knew that there was a expiry, there was a maturity. At the end of that, you are out of it. Okay, you are keen on your investment, you are looking into the companies, but it is only until that maturity. After that, you're not bothered, you are out. But equity is a long journey. You become the owner of a company by equity sources. You take an interest on the company, you earn. If the company is getting a profit, it comes to you. If the company is earning a loss, it comes to you. Do you get it? The responsibility of the proper running of a company falls to the equity holder. The impact will fall on to the equity holder. So understand, equity is a different world than debt. That's why I keep telling you, before moving to before moving to equity, you need to master the topic of debt first. Because the thinking of debt capital market is different to the thinking of equity capital markets. When it comes to equity, you have to know, you take interest of that company. You take undue risk on investment. Your cash flows are not guaranteed or not certain. So the difference is drastic. Okay. So when it comes to the equity market, your thinking should be on a owner perspective. You're not just an investor, you become part of that company. Now, there can be traders as well for short-term gain, but I'm talking about just the equity as an instrument. If you purchase equity or share as an instrument, you become a owner of that company. Okay. So ownership of a company is divided into units called shares. Okay. Each share represents ownership over that company. Depending on how many shares you hold or the percentage of your shareholding, it decides whether you are a significant shareholder or whether you are a minority shareholder. Okay. There is no any uniform level of shares. Each company will have different number of shares. One company can have 1 million shares. Another company can only have 2 shares. Another company can have 10 shares. Okay, the number of shares is not uniform. It depends from company to company and their par values. Okay, understand that. But for each unit, each share represents ownership over that company. When you buy a share of the company, you become a owner. The word you use is you are a shareholder of that company. When you become owner, what is your return? When you invest in an equity instrument, or if you invest in a debt instrument, what do you get? You get interest or coupon, and on maturity, you will get your face value. Okay. Here you are a owner or shareholder. What is your return? Just like interest, you will get your return called dividend. But there's a problem when it comes to dividends. What is the problem? Not all companies pay dividend, and there is no frequent timing for dividends. Why is that? There are certain companies who want to reinvest their profits without going to other debt sources. They are good in terms of earnings, so whatever the earnings they have, the net profit of it, they want to reinvest in the company and expand. So in such a level or in such point, they won't be declaring dividends. Sometimes when there is any undue issue, or let's say of unforeseen impact coming in, where their performance was not up to standard, they were not able to achieve their profitability as expected, then again dividends will fluctuate. They cannot declare a dividend for 1 year. They can declare a huge dividend next year. They can declare a very less dividend next year. Okay, there is no mandate as to how much they have to pay as dividend and when they have to pay as dividend. Okay, that's the biggest difference. Now when it comes to debt, there was nothing like that. When it comes to debt, if you are going to borrow money from someone else, you have to tell them when you are going to pay interest, what is the interest rate. This is all pre-agreed. Okay, but dividends is your payment coming out from the profit of the company. Interest is whether the company is making a profit or not, you have to pay because you borrowed funds. Here, money is coming from the owner. If there is a loss in the company, owner should bear that impact by not taking dividends. If there is a profit to the company, yes, then the owner can take the benefit of that by taking out dividends. Okay, so the amount in terms of dividend and the timing of dividend was not certain, is still not certain. Now, if you take 2020 last year, the initial year of COVID-19, so many companies reduced their dividend amounts, not paid dividends because they didn't have, they couldn't run the companies. You will have certain hotels not declaring dividends. Okay, so that's an indication of what dividend could be. It's not a certain cash flow, and timing of that cash flow is uncertain. But understand, dividend from a company is a signal to the shareholder. Let's say you have two companies. One company is consistently paying out dividends. Another company, okay, pays out dividend 2 years, another year nothing, okay, next year also nothing. Then after some time again they pay out dividend, very ad hoc. Without going into further analysis, investors might understand, look here, the company which pays consistent dividend is a stronger entity. Why? That dividend is signaling to me or signaling to the investors that they have consistent profits. They have a stronger background so that they consistently maintain their dividend policy. The other entity is not so well. Why? Their performance is ad hoc, hence the dividend policy being fluctuating. So even though dividend amount and timing is uncertain, dividend is a very good signaling policy of that company. So that is one cash flow. What's the other cash flow? When you buy a share, you invest certain money, right? Your capital. So when that price of the share increases or changes, that is also a return to you. When you buy the share today, let's say you bought it at 8 rupees, but in 2 years down the line, that particular share is trading at 62 rupees. What happens? That entire gain is for you. Gain from 8 to 62 rupees is to the shareholder. What is that gain called? Capital gain. So equity or shareholder has two types of cash inflows, dividend and capital gain. Now in dividend, I told you amount is not sure, timing is not sure. What's the issue with capital gain? Again, capital gains amount is also not sure, timing is also not sure. You don't know when you will get a capital gain, and you don't know by how much that capital gain will be. It depends on how the market is moving. For example, we now for the last 2 weeks, our stock market is having a, there is no limit on the number of shares that a company issues. It depends on that particular company's articles per se. Okay, so if the shareholders of that company and the management of that company decides, they can increase their shares in issue as well. They don't have to refer to registrar of company, they have to inform them, but you don't have to get any prior permissions for that. Okay, now here our stock market, you can see for the past 2 weeks they are going through a decline. Okay, so let's say you are someone who I think they don't have their previous prices in display. Okay, so this particular share, it was close to 12 rupees. So let's say you bought at 12 rupees 2 weeks ago and you tried selling it yesterday, you will have to sell it at 9.3. Is it a capital gain to you? No, capital loss. Why? You invested capital at 12 rupees per share, currently trading at only 9.3. So if you sell today, you will only get 9 rupees per share. Hence, facing a decline. Now, this particular this particular share, not immediately, but if you had bought this share, let's say 2 years ago, it was close to 2 rupees, if I'm right. It was close to 2 rupees or 2 to 4 rupees, if I'm correct. Okay, here you have, can you see? So you, for the last quarter, the lowest was 4 rupees. 2018 3. So if you bought this at 4 rupees in December 2019 and you tried selling it today, how much of a capital gain you would have? So you don't know when the capital gain will arise and by how much it will arise. Now here the amount of capital gain is unimaginable. If you bought it at 5 rupees, now you get to sell it at 166 rupees. So how many times is that gain? Okay. But now don't just jump into a conclusion saying all the shares are like this. No. There are, on the inverse could also happen where you buy at 116 and it declines up to 5 as well. So the volatility is very high when it comes to equity. Okay. Hence, it is considered as a riskier investment than debt instrument. Why? Because your dividend is not sure, your capital gain is not sure, you don't know the amount, you don't know the timing, and these two are the only cash flows you have of this instrument. So can you understand how uncertain the cash inflow is? So when you have so much of uncertainty, obviously the investment is risky. When the investment is risky, for an investor or for a shareholder to invest in that instrument, they expect a higher return. Okay, they expect a much higher return than even debt instruments. Hence, shares tend to carry a higher interest due to the higher risk they face. Another difference, debt instruments, we had an expiry at the end of a certain time. That instrument is expired, no more. But for shares, you don't have such an expiry. Every time I can buy, I can sell it to you. You can buy, you can sell it to someone else. It keeps changing. Yes. That doesn't mean the share is expired. No. The instrument still continues. Why is that? When you buy a share, you become owner of the company. Do you become owner of a company only for 2 years? Only for 5 years? No. The underlying expectation is you take a ownership or standing on that company for foreseeable future. Hence, the instrument doesn't have a maturity. Until you wind up the company, the instrument remains valid. Okay. When you become a shareholder, what are the privileges you get? You become owner of that company, yes. Other two reasons are you have a right on the residual, what is left of that company. Now this can go either way. Let's say your company has performed very well, you have achieved your targets. After that, you're winding down the company. The wealth that is left after paying all your debt holders is entirely the shareholder. Okay, so you can, that can be at a higher wealth position than when you started or when you invested in the company, or it can be at a very low position than when you started the company as well. Okay, it can go either way, but it is an entitlement to the shareholder. The shareholder is a residual claimant. When you are the owner, you can't be the first one to jump out of the ship. No? If you go, let's say a ship is sinking, you don't expect the captain of the ship to run away first. They are the pioneers, they are the ones who actually take that ship forward. So like that, owner is expected to be the residual claimant. You pay out all the others, all the third parties, the employees, the bankers, the government for tax, everything else. Whatever left is entirely yours. If there is anything left, yes. If there is no, then sorry, you have nothing left. Even the money you invested is no more. What's the other entitlement? Right to vote. When you become a shareholder, for each share you hold, you have a voting power. You have the ability to vote for a decision or vote against a decision taken by the company. You can appoint certain directors. So when you appoint a director, you can vote for that appointment or you can vote against that appointment as well. Why? You are the owner of that company. If you don't give your vote, what else? But understand, not all shares have this voting right. There are certain shares where the shareholder is not very keen on having this voting right. In such a situation, they remove this voting power from the share. What is that share type called? Non-voting shares. So if you invest in a share which is a non-voting share, you are a owner of the company, you get dividend of the company, everything, yes, you are residual claimant, all right, but you have no right to vote for company decisions. Now you will be wondering, how can there be a owner who's not so keen to take business decisions? Non-voting shares are usually there to attract foreign entities. Local companies, there are certain foreigners are very interested to invest, correct? But they are not so keen on taking business decisions for the company. Their view is, you invest on this company, a good company, sell it at a profit, get out. Yes, they do want dividend, but they don't want to get involved in voting. They don't want to take part in decision making. Hence, to cater to them, they have non-voting shares in line. How do you see whether a share is a voting share or a non-voting share in the stock market? So here you can see, let's say, commercial bank. I think I would have told this to you before as well. Let me just revamp it for you. So if you take this, when you see commercial bank, it shows two shares in the same name. One is a .n share, one is a .x. .n denotes voting share. In other words, this is a share for which the shareholder will get voting powers. Okay. Can you see here .x? Here it's a non-voting share. You don't have the power to vote. Because you don't have a benefit that other shareholders have, the price of a non-voting share is always lesser than the voting share. Can you see? You can see for any share as well. Most of the banks have both these types. Non-voting share is lesser than the voting share price. But dividends, other entitlements remain same. Okay. I think we are closer to our time to end, so we'll stop from here. So next week we'll be taking it forward from equity. So first we'll be talking about how equity and debt are, a bit different. So what financing is preferred, especially in initial stages of a company. And then we move on to certain terms used in equity, and we focus on the equity instruments. After that, we move on to, obviously, our stock market. Okay, one of my favorite lessons. Why? Very lively topic. You could see the changes in the market, in the live market as well. So would be a very interesting area for you all as well. We'll again meet next Saturday and carry forward from there. Okay. Thank you so much for listening in. Again, if you have not shared your email address with me, please do so. I will type my email address here. So at least you get to join from this Sunday's weekly session as well. Okay. Thank you so much for listening in. We'll meet again next Saturday. Okay.